for women who are leaders in media. So that includes magazines, book publishing, TV and film production, and online publishing. So pretty broad, and we continue to grow. Maybe Chandra wants to tell us about that when we get to her. So I'm the chair of the scholarship committee for WMG. And so obviously we offer scholarships, but also part of what we've been doing is sort of trying to reach out to people who might not know a lot about media and sort of talk about, here are the kinds of jobs you can have. It's not just the ones that you tend to know about, which is maybe editorial. There's lots of other jobs, back-end jobs like business, legal, operations. So anyways, that's some of what we'll talk about today. And just, yeah, I think that's enough about Women's Media Group. And then just today, I want you to know that this can be really informal. So if you have questions, use the raise your hand function and I'll call on you as soon as we have a moment to do that, or type it in the chat and I'll read off the question if you don't want to ask it yourself. But this is not super formal. We really want you to be able to learn what it is you want to know. So, please ask whatever your burning questions are. And we don't expect, everybody to know everything that we already know. So don't feel like any question is too basic. We will answer those questions. So I'm just going to really briefly introduce the women who are here to speak to you today. And then our first question will really get into a lot more about them and they'll be able to introduce themselves. So starting with Lynn Brown, if you would give a little wave. Lynn Brown is a writer, teacher, and digital storyteller and traveler whose work centers on issues of race, place, culture, and history. She's been published in well-known media outlets such as GQ, Ebony, Vice, and many others. And she's currently the digital editor of News and Trends at Lonely Planet and an adjunct professor of journalism and design at the New School. Thanks for joining us, Lynn. Next, we have Daniela Bone. Give us a wave. She's the development marketing director at Andrews McMeel Publishing. She's a native of Germany and originally trained as an editor, but then switched to marketing after moving to the United States. A decision she says she hasn't regretted. Two of the things that she's most passionate about are collaborating across departments and establishing marketing strategies for brand new products and categories. So if you're someone who likes to get people to read your favorite books, she can probably tell you how you can make that a job. Thanks, Daniela. Next, we have Julie Blattberg, who is our current co-president for Women's Media Group. She's a book publishing veteran with an acuity for compelling content and innovative ways to scale and drive revenue. She has held strategy, marketing, and operations positions at HarperCollins, Simon & Schuster, Disney Publishing, and Open Road Integrated Media. So she pretty much knows all the parts of publishing. In her consulting practice, she works with book publishers, authors, and nonprofits, both domestically and abroad, which I think is incredible, to capitalize on their content, to grow their audiences, develop messaging and branding, and optimize workflows and metadata, which isn't a super sexy word, but is kind of a sexy topic. So I hope someone has a question about that. Chandra Turner, just wave, is the founder of the Talent Fairy, a boutique recruiting services agency that connects companies with editorial leaders. When she's not seeking new talent, she works as a career coach, and she's brilliant, helping editorial folks find new jobs that they love or to love and thrive in the ones they've got. She's also the founder of the award-winning career site ed2010.com, and I know she'll talk about that. That's a really inspiring story. And also has held editorial leadership positions at some of the country's most successful media brands, including Cosmopolitan, Cosmo Girl, Parents, and Scholastic. So she also has such a breadth of knowledge about our industry. And I'm going to introduce her really quick, but she'll be late. Yona Desam is the CEO of Riverchild Media, a public relations firm specializing in the promotion of books by and for people of color. She was the associate director of publicity at Atria Books, where she conceived and executed publicity plans for a number of high-profile clients, including Kevin Hart, TD Jakes, Taraji P. Henson, and so many more. We could list them for the rest of this hour. She's also the co-founder of Collective 5 Entertainment and is the co-executive producer of Cooking with Chef Nadej on the Ebony Covering Black America podcast network. So she'll be popping in later on. So this is just such an incredible group of women. So I'm gonna get us started right away with our first question. And just remember, pop your questions into the chat, raise your hand. You know, I certainly have my own questions, but you all have your questions. So happy to jump to those. But my first question is, please tell us about what you do now. And I will start with Chandra, because you're right next to me on the screen.
Oh, great. Well, hello, you're right next to me too. You're right there. I don't know where you are for everybody else. Hi, everybody. It's weird not to see my audience, but I assume you're all there. I always consider myself an editor, even though I'm technically not an editor anymore. I feel like once an editor, always an editor. But now I'm a recruiter. So what I do is I work with brands, whether they be media brands or consumer product companies, startups, nonprofits, you name it. Everybody needs editors. Everybody needs people who know how to communicate with people in a very authentic way, and editors do that. And we do it well, even if we were trained to be journalists first. So that's really my niche, is making that fit between brands who need editors rather than marketers per se, and connecting those people. So I work as a recruiter. I also work as a career coach. So I help editors who want to make the transition to working in brands, or just make the transition into different parts of the media industry, and help them do that. So to recognize what their skills are and how to, create all of their personal marketing materials to make sure that they shine and that they are hyper-focused. I'm a big believer in having a specialty, even when you're young, even when you're starting out, even if it's just a passion and an enthusiasm for a certain area or industry or subject matter. So we can talk about that a little bit. My other side project is I am at Women's Media Group as the membership chair. So I work with everybody, within the board and in WMG to bring in more members and more diversity. So that's my other job. And I welcome any questions. I have been working with young people breaking into media for a long time. For a very long time. I started in 2010 when I was a whippersnapper, just starting out myself, and really because I didn't know anybody in the industry, and I didn't know that you needed to know people in the industry to get ahead. And I quickly figured out that I needed to know more people. So I have since spent my entire career helping young people, and now old people, because I am the old people, get ahead and work in this industry. So eager to answer any questions anybody has. Okay.
Thank you. I love that how you talk about when you're helping people look for work, it's marketing. I think that's actually really important. And we all kind of at some point have to be marketers, right? So we'll probably talk more about that, especially because the next person in line is Daniela. So let's go to you, because I'm sure you'll be able to talk a lot about marketing too.
Hi, everybody. My name is Daniela. I am, as Nevin already mentioned, I'm the Development Marketing Director at Andrews McMill Publishing. We're actually located in Kansas City, which I know in the media field is also a little bit unusual. Basically what I do in my current role is that I work on our newest products and product lines, anything that doesn't have an established process in place yet. So for example, our company is fairly new to audiobooks. So I work on audiobooks, and I, just go along and establish processes and try things out, see how everything works, and, over time establish our marketing for that particular category. I also work on special projects in the company. I also still oversee the trade marketing, all of which means I work with a variety of different people in the company and outside, which is something I tremendously enjoy. And also, I welcome any questions as well.
Great, thank you. And how about Lynn, would you go next?
Sure. So I'm Lynn Brown, and so you said what I'm doing right now. So right now I am the digital editor for News and Trends at Lonely Planet, which I think most people have heard of. It's a travel. It started off as a travel guidebook publisher, and now we do online travel news, travel guides, a little bit of everything. And so, yeah, my day to day is really identifying stories, writing stories, editing pieces, that kind of thing. And then I also work as an adjunct at the New School where I teach journalism classes. So it's an undergrad class, and I've done sort of like journalism 101, but then also kind of, okay, now business of journalism type stuff, now you've got the basics. How do you get out there and get your stories out there and get yourself out there as a journalist? So I do both of those things.
Great, thank you. And Julie?
Well, in as much as having a specialty, the thing you're known for, there's also something that we might call a generalist. And in my 30-year publishing career, as Nevin said, I've worn a lot of hats, and sometimes it's marketing and messaging communications. Sometimes it's operations and optimization and metadata. And sometimes it's strategy and launching companies. So I'm a bit of a generalist. And as a consultant with my own practice for 4 years, after many, many years on staff at traditional book publishers, my current project list includes writing web copy for an educational nonprofit, helping a Middle Eastern media company launch a multi-million-dollar book publishing business, helping a nonprofit that already publishes books to optimize their rights process. And I'm about to work with a marketing company to create an editorial calendar and ramp up their marketing messaging. So that's a little bit of what it looks like if you're a generalist with a lot of interests and a lot of talents that you're known by.
Great, thank you. So we'll stick with you, Julie, and continue on with our next question, because I think that was a really great segue. So building off of that, what was your path to where you are now?
Like many English majors, I was obviously one of you. I thought I wanted to be an editor, and I knew I wanted to work in book publishing. I thought maybe magazine publishing, maybe advertising, but I landed on books. And the first job I got was through my brother's girlfriend's college roommate. So tenuous connection, but it was word of mouth. And this may be informative for each of you as you consider how you start networking. I was an editorial assistant at a teeny tiny company. And I thought, well, this is great. I'll get some experience. Then I got a call from HarperCollins, which was one of the largest book publishers of the English language. And they offered me a job as an assistant to the managing editor. Not editorial. Managing ed is a different set of functions and skills. But I thought, this is my foot in the door in a really big, reputable company. And I took it. Turns out I was really good at it. And I never wanted to be an editor again. So the point of me going into some detail about that is sometimes you don't know till you get there. And it wasn't like I tried editorial in a big way and I didn't like it. I was given an opportunity and I really liked it. And from there, I'll describe my trajectory as tied to my own curiosity. Oh, well, how come marketing does it that way? And well, what is your process for doing that? And how do these two departments in a book publisher talk to each other? And by paying attention and asking questions and figuring things out, I was able to end up wearing many hats. So the advice there is be curious, and it's okay to ask questions. And there's also a lot one can teach themselves.
Yes, thank you. So now I'm just going to go backwards. So Lynn, would you tell us your path to where you are?
Sure. Mine was also sort of, weird. I actually started off in like nonprofit communications. My undergrad was more, it was interdisciplinary, so it was like writing, peace studies, and cultural studies. And so that sort of segued into nonprofit communications, which is where I started, writing stuff for websites and newsletters and things like this. And then I decided I wanted to go back and do an MFA because sort of writing and creative writing was a passion. So I did that. And then during my MFA, I did a program in Paris where I was working on this project about like African-American expat writers. And so I was hanging out with a lot of people, and I kept going to these African restaurants. And places that you don't have in the US, like Senegalese. Well, I guess we have it now. At the time, we didn't have as much. So it was like Senegalese food and Guyanese food and all of this, and Guyanan food. And I was like, oh man, this would make a good article. And so I decided I was going to pitch it, and kind of because I didn't really know. I knew how to pitch because, like I said, I was doing an MFA and I pitched stories and things like this. But I think it was one of my first times pitching a magazine, and I was like, yeah, well, I don't know, will you pitch a travel story? I'll pitch Condé Nast Traveler, and they took it, which was kind of shocking for me. But then I did a couple stories for them, and that sort of snowballed into me doing a lot of freelance writing, specifically travel writing. I've also done a lot of arts and culture. A lot of my work sort of centers around, like you said, history, culture, and place. So I was doing that. I've worked on staff at a literary travel magazine, so sort of this intersection of the two. And I was teaching classes. So I've been sort of just picking things up as a freelancer and doing my own kind of cobbling together my own sort of freelance business. And I was working for Lonely Planet as a freelancer, actually, working on one of their projects where they were taking work from their guides and translating it into more digital content. And I just really liked the team, and we really liked each other. And they were like, hey, we really would love to have somebody on staff that with this background, particularly around diversity stuff and arts and culture stuff and all of that. And so I was like, yeah, sure. And so I joined them. I've actually only been there for not that long at all, full time. So yeah.
Great, thank you. And I think, she went from freelance to in-house. And I don't know how often we hear those stories. A lot of people, I feel like I hear about more people that start in-house and go to freelance. So I think it's important to hear Lynn's story. Terry, I see your question. It's a great one. And I want to make sure that we hear from Daniela and Chandra on this second question. Then we're going to go back to that one because I think it's going to be a great tie-in. But Daniela, would you tell us about your path to where you are now?
Absolutely. So as you heard, I'm actually a native of Germany. So my path started out a little bit differently. I had known for a while I was really interested in book publishing. So while I was still in college, I found a small local publishing house, actually very specialized textbook publishing house. And I just contacted them and said, do you ever offer internships? And they did. And they hired me for a summer internship, and it went very well. So that led to some freelance work with them. And then once I graduated, which that is the part in Germany that's kind of standard. If you want to work in publishing, you have to do a 1 or 2 year traineeship with a publishing house. That's the standard way. So I got hired by them. I did my traineeship. Then I moved, and that was all in editorial, I should say. So then I moved to the United States. And I just assumed, okay, no one has been waiting for an editor who is a non-native speaker. So let's just not even try. But I didn't know I wanted to continue to work in book publishing. So I just started looking at other opportunities. And I had, through that traineeship, already gotten a first taste of marketing and a little bit of publicity. And so once I moved here, I just started taking opportunities that sounded interesting and as if I could collect additional skills that would come in handy. So I worked at a communications firm for a while, working on newsletters for business clients. I worked in journal publishing for a while. And then eventually a position opened up at the company where I still work in trade marketing. So they were looking for a trade marketing manager. And by then, through events and advertising and other things I had really picked up experience in along the way, it ended up being a great fit. And as you see, I still work there. I have a different role now, but it's just been, one thing building on another, basically, over the years.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think both you and Julie hit on this. One of the things that I think is really important, that there's so much that you can do that you don't know going in, whether you'll like it, you might not even know that it exists. I mean, one of the things that I wasn't aware of was subrights that I enjoy. I do it from the buying side, where I advise on subrights at Google, but it wasn't something that when I first got started, I thought it was what I wanted, but I acquired audio rights. So you never know. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to, that I thought this kind of panel was really helpful, was that you're hearing that you might think there's this one thing, and then you might discover there's something connected, but kind of different and more interesting maybe, or more suited to your talents, or the kind of lifestyle you want to lead, or whatever. So I love that story, Daniela, of how you've gotten to where you are. And Chandra, how about you? What was your path?
I was very much a good girl, and I did what people told me to do. I wanted to be a magazine editor, first and foremost. I wanted to be a magazine editor in New York. I wanted to be an editor-in-chief of a magazine. So I was told that you needed to be an intern, and then you need to be an editorial assistant. And that's exactly what I did. I did exactly the little path that you're supposed to do. And I was too afraid to take a gap year or to veer off the path. I climbed the ladder just like you're supposed to do. And then of course, there was huge disruption in the industry. Suddenly there were all these websites, right? This I started out in print, and I was like, oh, maybe I should look at that. But no, I got to stay on my little path. But it was really hard to kind of divert and realize, oh, it's okay to change. It's okay to morph and shift and whatever. And it took me a long time to be okay with that and to use my skills in different ways. Like I said, I had also, while I was climbing the masthead in magazines, I was also running this organization called Ed 2010 that was all about becoming an editor-in-chief by the year 2010. Oh God, here we are. So you can just tell how long ago that was, because that was the dream. And so I was running that on the side, and everybody at the time was like, oh, turn that into real business. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I want to be an editor. I want, I have, this is my dream, and this is what I want to do. And I'm glad that I did that then, but I'm also glad that I didn't let go of Ed 2010 and everything that created, because eventually there was a huge shift, of course, you guys all know, and with print publications, and there's hardly any of them left anymore, and everything has moved to digital. And now brand publishing is huge, where media companies are no longer they're not primarily the ones creating content. Everybody's creating content. Everybody's creating content across every industry. When that wasn't conceivable when I was starting out. It was media companies created content. And then if a brand created a content, we were all snobby about it. We're all like, well, that's from a brand. I don't want to have anything to do with it. I'm too good for that. And I was too good for that for a very long time. Then I started to realize, who has the money? Where's the good content coming from? Why does it matter if they call themselves a media company and they call themselves a brand? Can the consumer make those decisions? Whatever. So I turned around, and that was a lot of my thinking, and I believe a lot of other people in society has too at that time. So I'm glad that I made that shift myself, and I'm glad that I also kept that organization going for 20 something years, because that organization that was mentoring and educating people in media, what used to be magazine media, I've now shifted to be media and content as a whole. and created all these connections and people that I've worked with over the years, and was just a natural segue for me to run a recruiting agency. So, you know, I was connecting people all those years and never wanted it to be my career. And now it is. And how freaking fantastic is that? So I'm glad that I had my little, you know, side gig, you know, and a lot of people do that. A lot of people write on the side, or, you know, write screenplays on the side, or they write whatever, you know. And so I do recommend that when you first are starting out, that you don't let those little passions die, because you never know when you might be able to pick them up and incorporate them into what you're doing moving forward. And, you know, anything that requires you to, you know, flex a creative muscle, even if you're an editorial assistant, all you're doing, you know, when you're first starting out, is, you know, more admin kind of tasks, or maybe they're not so sexy yet. It's good to be able to have something on the side, which you can do now. Like, really, you can start your own podcast, you can have your own, you know, Insta feed that's huge, like whatever, like there's so much opportunity to do that. So I do recommend that, you know, don't wait for all of those opportunities to just come to you, start them on your own. And they'll give you gratification, and who knows, maybe someday it'll be your second career, your third career, or whatever. So the path is not always linear.
That was great, Chandra. And actually, I love that as a segue over to Terry's question, which is this: what was the biggest challenge you faced when entering the publishing field? And how do you think that's changed for people entering the field now? And just to mix things up, I'm going to start this time with Lynn.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I think that I had a really hard time sort of getting part of my career trajectory in terms of like starting with nonprofit communications and going to freelance was because I felt that I had a hard time because I didn't have those connections to like sort of get into traditional media. And it was in some way easier for me to pitch a story or do a freelance project than it was to kind of get the connections to get a full-time position. And like, you know, I certainly out of undergrad applied for like publishing jobs and stuff like that. And, you know, it was like one of hundreds of resumes. But then once I started to kind of, it really picked up for me actually around grad school. And I think it's because I was specifically doing an MFA. I was in San Francisco, but I just started making these connections with people. I worked briefly with a literary agent, and like just making enough connections that then you know, the freelancing started to pick up. And so I guess like my advice would be to make as many connections as you can. Like if you know you want to be in publishing, make as many connections as you can now, because those are the people that you can then talk to later and kind of leverage to get your resume pulled out of the pile for a magazine or for a publishing company. I think you're still muted, Nevin.
Sorry. All right. Thanks, Lynn. And Daniela, why don't you take that one? What was difficult for you, and what do you think is different about what's difficult now?
Yeah, I mean, I think the truth is simply that publishing as an industry just keeps changing, evolving, you know, one challenge is replaced by another. I'm trying to think when I first started, that was such a different time. Not to date myself, but just in terms of the digital, so much has been added over the years that, you know, I can't even imagine. Probably back in the day, we were worried about how to respond to the digital new developments, and that seems so long ago now. I can say the position or the company that I work for now, when I started there, Borders, anybody remember Borders books? They had just gone under. So there was a lot of panic just around how is this going to change everything, and you know, what does it mean for all of us and our work processes and the opportunities we have. And, you know, so now more than 10 years down the line, we know it's it's worked out. Everything has worked itself out, but also everything has changed. So yeah, that's all I can say about that. It'll continue to change. Things will always get disrupted and shuffled, and really the best thing to do is just to try and respond to the changes and acquire additional skills that make it easier to respond to them.
Thanks, Daniela. And how about Julie? You want to take that one next?
On a practical level, the hardest thing for me starting out was the incredibly low salary. And that may have changed a little bit. It's probably not changed enough. I graduated from college, I started working, and I was living at home with my mother because I couldn't afford rent and did what I had to do to save up money, because living on my own, or I had a roommate in the beginning, that was a priority for me. So that's one thing. And as I said, I hope it's gotten better, but if you want to live in New York or San Francisco, it's just always going to be tough.
Yeah, it is. I think one of the biggest challenges has been and will continue to be that jobs in publishing are highly desired. There's just not as many jobs as there are people who want them. So Chandra, do you want to speak on this topic?
Well, the good news is there's two things: that there are laws in New York City that help you. So if the employer is in New York City, then they have to pay anybody who does not receive overtime, essentially a salaried worker who is contributing. So sometimes you can get away with that as an editorial assistant, sometimes not, but most of the major media companies now comply. And that is 58, the baseline is 58,500, which is still below the poverty line, just so you know. I know that sounds crazy if you don't live here. But so that has helped a lot. It has helped a lot. Now, the biggest challenge is the next rung on the ladder. What happened is, like 3 years ago when this change went into effect, the associate editors weren't even making that. So then you have this, like, good 5 years where everybody's making the same amount of money, no matter what, level they're at. So most have to comply with that. That has helped junior level in New York City, definitely. The other thing that's going to help is that there is a transparency and salary law that was passed in the fall. And it was going to go into effect April 1st. Maybe they thought that would be an April Fool's joke, and so they changed it. So I don't know why, but now it's May 15th. So every job posting that is from a company that has more than 4 employees, which is pretty much every company that you would want to work at, has to publish the job salary on the job posting. So that, yes, of course, they could still post a really low job, but that will help with equalizing. It's huge. It's going to be a huge change. It's going to be a huge change for the publishing industry. Also, because, like I was saying before, that editorial jobs are now in demand. Editorial skills are now in demand outside of publishing. So you're competing with the same people. And it used to be that it was highly competitive. Well, now you have other industries coming to get those same people. So there's going to have to be a change, or they're not going to get the talent. They're not going to get the talent out of school, and they're not going to get the talent, at any level, frankly, unless they're willing to up the salaries, especially those entry level salaries, which they used to be able to get away with paying like dirt, rates. So I'm confident that those going to change, and it also helps. We've got, inflation is requiring, workers are demanding. There's more talent out there than there ever has been that is very discerning, and there are a lot of jobs that are open. So it's shifted for the first time in many, many, many years. It's finally shifted in favor of the applicant. So freaking take advantage of that. Absolutely.
Thank you. And Yona has just joined us. And so if you're okay with that, Yona, I'd love to jump over to you and ask you a sort of combination question. So our second question, which you heard in our previous panel, which is, what was your path to where you are now? But if we could also combine that with the question from Terry, which was, what was, there you are. Sorry, you moved on my screen and I got, wait, what?
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
So combining that with her question, which was, what was your biggest challenge when you were entering the field? And what do you think are the challenges now, whether they're the same or different? So
The biggest challenge for me was actually that I was older. This was a second career for me. You know, I came from education and I needed a break. You know, I was just tired of fighting the system, and I decided, I actually was on my schools. I graduated from City College. I was on their website and saw a publishing certificate program. And I was like, huh. But I had no idea that I was going to have to take such a drastic cut in pay. So I just was floating in when, I don't know, who was it, Chandra, that was talking about yeah, girl. I had to take a huge pay cut. But then I went back to grad school, ended up having to move back in with my parents. So you really got to love this. At least, that was the case when I, started in about, oh God, almost 20 years ago. Jeez, I've been in the biz that long. But I think that was like my biggest challenge, being older and a little bit more seasoned in that I kind of experienced life a little bit more than a lot of the editorial assistants. So kind of getting my foot in the door was a little harder, because people would kind of, be able to tell that I was in my 30s at that point, and being, and just somebody giving me a shot, but thankfully, I believe in the power of the universe. And I just, really sold myself to people. I literally would go, to go to different conferences and things like that, and put my best foot forward. And fortunately for me, I had some people actually give me a shot. And, all these years later, I launched River Child Media about 2 years ago, almost 2.5 years ago, actually. And that's after a, oh God, 15-year experience in publishing. I left as an associate director of publicity at Atria Books back in 2019. So in terms of, challenges now, I would definitely echo what Chandra was saying about the pay. I have a lot of students, like I teach now at the City College program in their publishing practicum class, and I have to be honest, with my students. Can you imagine, those who are graduating from some of these Ivy League schools? And I've always seen this, whenever, there's somebody in editorial, whatever, and they're talking about, applicants, and they get so excited when they get, students from like Harvard or from, Brown or one of these places. But at the same time, I'm like, how are you going to pay it? How are they going to pay their bills? Because they also owe Harvard and Brown, Princeton money, and not all of them, were able to, have scholarships or things like that, where they didn't have this huge, amount of debt. So whenever I would get any college student, even when I was interviewing for assistants, I would always, try to push HR whenever I could and say, listen, can we get them a little bit, more money? But a lot of them that are doing it because of the love of it, Um, so yeah, so challenges, definitely. Newbies, coming in, it's just really kind of getting that face time, with these editors and these, because there was a time when I started PR, we were given corporate Amex cards as a publicist. And you'd be able to go and take people to lunch, and you were able to, organize these little like meet and greets. It's a lot more difficult now, and even more so with COVID, kind of getting people, to come out. But those are the types of things I was able to do back then that for me has helped me with my relationships, because PR is all relationships, guys. It's all relationships. It's who you know, who's going to return your email, even if it's a no. And it's a little bit more challenging now because people are changing positions, and the same people that were there just last year are no longer there. So it's that constantly having to to revamp your list, reconnect with people, watching to see who's going where. So that's a challenge, for me now, especially as an entrepreneur. Like when I was working in house, we would get emails that would circulate, say, oh, so and so is now the producer at this show, or this is a booker for that person. You don't get that as an independent person. So that's a challenge too, just making sure that your lists are fresh, that you're maintaining, those relationships. Because when people are paying you, several $1,000s a month, to work on something, they want to know that it's worth it, that you have those relationships. So for me, it's constantly saying, you still there? You still there? Can we get on a Zoom call, for coffee or something, just to keep those relationships going, to find out what they're doing, what they're interested in. It's harder when you're working in independently. So that's my biggest challenge as an indie publicist now.
Yeah,
I hope I
that's
answered your
great.
question.
Yeah, you did. And actually, I would love to use that as another segue into the topic of networking. I just give one tip that maybe you wish you knew right from the start, or that you think has been really integral to your ability to network and to leverage your network into opportunities for yourself and your network. And I'm just going to open this up. Go ahead. It looks like you're ready, Yona.
Yeah, I would say two things. Find out who their assistant is, because assistants are your friends, y'all. They are your friends. They're the ones that are going to say, hey, Yona, this person has a window between this and this, you might want to call, or you might want to make an appointment, that kind of thing. Assistants have been my saving grace. And the second thing is follow up. When you are in any type of environment where you are meeting people and you get a chance to talk to them, and then you get their contact information, call them, email them, seriously. And try to do it within 2 days of you actually meeting them, so that you are still fresh in their mind. I mean, unless you have a sparkling personality like I do, and they might, they'll remember you for weeks on end. At least I like to think so anyway. Follow up is key. Maintain those relationships. Like I said, get on a virtual coffee. Some people, now that the world is opening up, try to meet them, in person, and just check in with them every couple of months. Hey, how are you doing? This is what I'm working on. What are you working on? That kind of thing. So you always remain on their radar for a number of things. For me, it's for potential business, but it's also other networking opportunities. I get invited to, different events, as a result of that, where it opens up a whole new world, for you. So that's what I would say, just making those connections, maintaining them, and following up when you do meet them.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else want to take that one on?
I will. I think that what Yona says is really smart. So many people take cards and never follow up, or too afraid. I used to speak a lot to college students, and it was always interesting. Would speak to hundreds of kids throughout the day, and then everybody would come up after, ask me questions, whatever, take my card. And then every time it'd be one or two people out of hundreds, they weren't afraid to come up and talk afterwards, but then they were afraid to or they just never did it. So I think that that's really smart. You actually have to do it. And most people want to help. Most people really, truly want to help, especially if they're putting themselves in a situation like that, or like this. The other thing that I think is important to remember when you're first starting out is that your networking isn't necessarily just reaching out to people at the top. A huge part of it is making legitimate friendships with people at your level. So I think that, in the beginning, you're I don't know anybody. And it's well, people that you're taking classes with, the fellow or intern, hopefully, that you're working with. If you're not, make sure that you do. I think that all of my jobs have come from when I was moving up that, ladder, when I was working in magazine media. came from my friends and colleagues, like who would either recommend me or tip me off to something, or, you know, it's all about the relationships, and they have to be authentic and real for them to work. So that's making legitimate friendships. And then it also makes networking not feel so scary, like you have to like go to an event and, you know, have your, you know, card and your resume and your handshake and all of that. It's more really truly about bonding and making friends with people. And true connection. And then somehow that makes it less scary. And it's like, if you have somebody, if you're in common with somebody because they're your roommate's friend and you guys do the same thing, well, shit, like hang out, make that legitimate connection. And then you never know, like when you're gonna, I mean, Julie and I actually have that. I know her through a good friend of mine. And then we ended up reconnecting with Women's Media Group. But those kinds of things, that's what true networking, good relationships is. You know, like some of my best friends, I met them as an intern and I met them as an editorial assistant. And I still work with them today. So that's really what I think makes good networking. And you can do that right now.
Yeah.
So, you know, in your classes.
Thank you.
I agree with all of that. And I would add, you know, take opportunities, even if they don't seem directly connected. So if your goal is to work in, let's say, book publishing, and you have a secret passion for data or whatever it is, maybe it doesn't seem directly connected, but believe me, there are so many skills now that in the media world, people will be loving it if you come with those already in hand. So if there's an opportunity to, I don't know, take additional training or join a group or whatever for data analysis or for email marketing or for anything like that, you know, just try it out. You'll meet people, do your best to stay in touch with them, as everybody has said, and see if you're not going to discover something about yourself in the process that might ultimately come back around to help.
Yeah, thanks, Julie.
If I could add a 2-second, relatively easy pro tip, connect with people officially on LinkedIn. I'm sure you all have been hearing about the importance of LinkedIn for professional networking, for discovery, for being discovered by recruiters. If you are someone who has a LinkedIn profile today, you've probably written down our names. I would say send an invite. And one day you're going to say, I don't remember that person's name, but she worked for Lonely Planet, and let me go to my LinkedIn. So that's my other piece of advice.
I guess I'll throw one in here. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Lynn.
Oh, no, I was going to say, I'll throw one in here too. I think one of the things that has actually helped me is it's like, I'm actually an introvert. I think I've talked about this before. And like, it's hard sometimes for me to like, you know, be in a group of people that like at a networking event or something. They're good for me, but I tend to like meet one person that I like hanging out with, and then I hang out with that person. But I think that I'm really good at emails, like, and I think it's okay to cold email people, and it's okay, like everyone has said, most people want to help, and so even if you're just like, hey, you know, I would love to have a informational interview. I'd love to like talk to you about what you do. I'm a student and I'm interested in, you know, being a digital editor or being whatever. Like, do you have a minute for coffee? Like most people will, if they have the time, will do it, you know? And yeah, I mean, I think that it's easy to be intimidated, but I think you got to like fake it till you make it, honestly. Like that's been kind of the best advice for me, is just, you know, go for it and talk to people. And I think coffee right now is great because I think people are just starting to like maybe want to go out again. It's about to get nice. Go sit outside somewhere for coffee with somebody that does a job that you want to do, you know what I mean? And I think that that's something that has been helpful for me as someone that's not always good at like working the room, you know? So.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, a job that maybe you don't think you want to do, but you're just interested in learning more. I met with Random House Audio's business person. I was actually taking a class, which is why I talked to her. But once I talked to her, I was like, oh my gosh, I get you so much more now. And it was really useful because as an assistant, I had to fill out our P&Ls every year before my boss had even looked at it. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. after I talked to her, I thought, oh gosh, now I get it. Now I understand what these numbers mean. I actually understand this formula now. Like it was so incredible. But I wanted to say two things. If you do those coffees, when you're done, maybe not all of them, but I would say 80% of them, your last question should be, is there anybody else you think I might be able to talk to that might be helpful, that might be willing? Always ask for somebody else. But my second piece is networking isn't just about what your network can do for you. Think about what you can do for your network, and not after they ask, before they ask. Think about how are you a symbiotic part of that network. And part of the reason is selfish, because if you help people, they want to help you. As well as if you help someone get a job and someday you want to go to that company that they're at, or maybe they move to a different company that you want to go to, you're very clearly connected with them. But part of it too is because we're all good people and we like to help our friends. So just don't lose sight of that when you're worried about what kind of work you're going to do. I'm not sure we have time to answer these last two questions. So I think what I'm going to say here at the end is a couple of the panelists have put their LinkedIn in, no pressure if it's not something you can do right now. And I would just say those who have done that are totally willing to hear from you. So use that LinkedIn to connect. If you have further questions, that's why we did this. And I think maybe I'll just open it up in this last 3 minutes. If you have any other questions, pop them in, but also do any of the panelists have any like final advice for that foot in the door job, or even maybe you've got that foot in the door, how do you make the next step?
I would say if you are an assistant, don't be a lazy one. I've had experiences, with assistants that, wait to be told, what to do. My best assistants are the ones who kind of got the lay of the land and knew how to deal with me. Like one knew that I don't really like to talk to people before 11 o'clock. It's just a thing. I use the first couple of hours just to kind of get my head around the day, that kind of thing. So she understood that. So she would just do something simple like email me or, would check in with me daily and say, hey, Yona, I'm looking at your schedule today. Do you have time to sit and talk? Is there a particular campaign that I can be more involved in? Or I have some ideas about this campaign. Because what I did not want is like, there's a difference between like actually having like a publicity assistant that is a budding publicist and then somebody who's just going to be an administrative assistant and that's all they're going to do, process bills and, do mailings and things like that. The assistants that I've had experiences with that have gone on and have really moved up are the ones who really were hungry. And you could tell that they loved what they did as much as I did. And they were always looking for ways to be either, included more in campaigns and decision making and execution, of campaigns. So if you have an idea, speak up. Let them know what's going on. Don't be one of those passive, types of people, especially in PR, because if you're that passive, then you don't need to be in PR. Seriously, but I would definitely say, jump in there once you get a lay of the land and see where you can fit in. And, those are the people that I would, also recommend for promotions sooner rather than later.
Great, thank you. Any other?
I just wanted to say we spoke briefly earlier about being a specialist versus being a generalist, and I think a case can be made for either. But no matter what it is, whether you kind of move around between different areas in a company or from company to company or stay in one lane, everybody has some kind of superpower that is their specialty, I think. So some people are just great at working with other people and pulling them together. Some people are great at cutting through red tape and getting stuff done. You know what I mean? And so that's also something, just kind of, listen and figure out what that is for yourself and then work that.
Yeah, that's great advice. And you may not know that in your first job. It may be something that you learn after a while. So allow yourself to keep learning stuff about yourself.
I was going to say, don't be afraid to take drastic changes sort of off of that, Nevin, is like, you know, if you're in a position, you're in editorial because you thought that's what you wanted to do, and actually you can't stand it and you want to do something else, like, don't be afraid to you know, make a radical change. Go jump to another department, go look at other positions, go talk to someone that has nothing to do with publishing, you know. I think that, like, this is often not a linear path, and like that means it can be scary on one hand, but I think that also means there's a lot of opportunity for growth and to learn new things. So
Yeah. Julie, you're not muted, so I think you might have something to say. Did you have something to say on that? One last thing.
I feel like I'm the one that keeps coming up with the very practical tips, but when thinking about applying for your first jobs, think about all the things that you do to build your resume, because when you start out, you don't have any experience. If you can do an internship, internships are always impressive on a resume. They're great for networking, great for contacts, great for building your knowledge. If you have a passion for book publishing and you're on Instagram and you post about books all day long, put that on your resume. It shows another aspect of your life and how you are genuinely someone who talks about books all day long. If you write or edit for a paper, if you are a member of the English club, all of these extracurricular things can prove to a hiring manager, this person doesn't just want to work in fill in the blank, they're living it already. And it's a way to talk about your experience without ever having had a full-time job in publishing or in whichever part of media is of interest to you.
Yeah, that's a great point. And because internships are also somewhat hard to come by in media, but that doesn't mean that you're not getting experience. I consider my bookstore job one of the most important things I ever did, and I didn't do it until I started freelancing. But I can't believe I didn't do it sooner. Thank you so much, everyone. Like I said, I know it's only an hour. It feels like not enough time, and maybe not all your questions got answered. So you've got our contact info now. Thank you for your questions. Thank you to the panelists for taking your lunch hour to chat with us. Can't wait to see everyone here in their media jobs in the next couple of years. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming to BCC, and you know, this will be disseminated to other students and members of our community. So thank you very much.
Just so with the question, Kathleen, are you related to Gary Erta?
I am actually related to Gary Erta. Yes.
That's so funny. I worked at Simon & Schuster for so many years, and I love Gary. I saw the last name. I was like, you got to be related. There can't be more than
there aren't that many Ertas. Yes.
Yes.
That's so funny.
I love him. Just tell him Jonas. If Jonas says hi, I adore Gary. I worked with Gary for years. That's my boy.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all
Thanks,
so
everyone.
much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for great advice. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.